I'm Maris Wimble, 67 years old, and I'd just finished tying the ribbon on my granddaughter's birthday gift when I realized I'd forgotten to eat breakfast. The silver bracelet sat in a small velvet box tucked inside brightly wrapped paper shaped like a book. Olivia loves to read, just like I did when I was her age. My hands were stiff from the cold, and the ache in my knees had returned with the change in weather. But I'd chosen my best dress and pressed it the night before. Navy blue with little flowers, because today was important. Sheila had said the party would start at noon in Northridge, and that traffic could be bad, but I didn't want to be late. Not for Olivia. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever shown up for someone who forgot how much you've given. I left my house in San Bernardino just after 10. The old Ford was slow to start, like always, but it carried me through the winding roads and up toward those white columned houses where every driveway gleams with something new. Sheila and Paxton's home sat like something from a magazine, 2 stories with manicured hedges and windows dressed in linen. When she first brought Paxton around, she didn't want him to see our place. The cracked garden tiles, the worn chairs out back. Edsel never minded things like that, but I could tell Sheila did. Emma opened the door for me, her voice gentle, like always, and she took my coat with a smile. "Everyone's in the parlor, Mrs. Wimble," she said. The sound of laughter floated from the other room, and then Olivia came running, her arms wrapping tight around my waist. "Grandma, you came?" She smelled like vanilla and that sweet perfume Sheila always buys. "For her happy birthday, honey," I whispered and handed her the gift. Sheila walked over with a glass in her hand, a dress that looked like it belonged behind glass. "Mom," she said, glancing at the clock. "We weren't expecting you so early. I thought traffic might be heavy," I replied. Pausing before I added, "Just didn't want to miss anything." She gave a half smile and motioned to Emma to bring me something to drink. I saw Altha then, Paxton's mother, seated near the fireplace. Like always, pearls at her neck, diamonds in her ears. She nodded once. "Maris, glad to see you could make it." Not a hug, not even a handshake, just a plain observation. She'd always made it clear she saw me as ordinary. I tried to ignore it. Olivia opened her bracelet and her eyes lit up. "It's a book," she said, "and it opens." "Very nice," Sheila said. "The way someone says something they don't mean." Then Paxton came over, shook my hand, asked how my house was fine. I told him, though I hadn't fixed the roof yet, and the water heater rattled whenever it ran. I didn't want to seem small in front of all that granite and marble. By 1 o'clock, the house was full. Corbin and Veronica showed up late. Sheila rolled her eyes when she saw them. Corbin hugged me briefly before wandering off toward one of Paxton's friends. I found a corner to sit and watch the party go on. Sheila floated between guests like she belonged to another world, one that never had to worry about coupons or saving receipts. The gifts were opened after lunch. Olivia smiled through each one, and then something happened that made the room go still. Sheila held out a small box and said, "This one's for Grandma Altha from Paxton and me." I watched Altha unwrap a necklace, sapphires that shimmered like water, and the whole room lit up around her. "They match your eyes perfectly," Sheila said, fastening it around her neck. I hadn't expected anything, not really, but the contrast struck deep. "What a beautiful necklace," I said gently. "Must have cost a fortune." Sheila turned to me, leaned in and said low but sharp, "You're just jealous, Mom. These kinds of gifts aren't for you. You're not worthy." I stood there for a moment, stunned, heat rising in my face. "I'm sorry," I said barely above a whisper, and walked away. No one followed. I closed the bathroom door behind me and leaned over the sink, my reflection staring back, flushed and hurting. What had happened to my daughter? The one who used to dance barefoot in the backyard with a flower crown she'd made herself. When did that little girl vanish? That's where I'll stop for now. Because what happened after that moment was the beginning of something I never saw coming. And I think if I'd known what that birthday party would lead to, I might have packed more than just a gift in my purse that day. I might have packed my goodbyes too. I stayed in the bathroom longer than I meant to. 15 minutes, maybe more. I didn't want to go back out there, not after what Sheila had said. But I didn't want to cause a scene either. So I splashed cool water on my face, patted it dry with one of Sheila's embroidered hand towels, and stepped out. From down the hall, I heard laughter and voices. The party hadn't stopped. I made my way back to the living room. No one noticed I was gone. Olivia was busy playing with her friends. Sheila stood beside Altha, both of them smiling, admiring that sapphire necklace like it was the crown jewel of the evening. I found an empty chair in the corner and sat quietly until it was time to leave. Emma brought out the cake not long after. 3 tiers, fondant figures, 12 candles glowing bright. Everyone sang. I sang too, though my voice caught on the last few words. The guests began to leave after that, couples collecting their kids' coats slipping off hooks, thank yous murmured at the door. I picked up my purse and turned to go. Sheila stopped me just as I reached for my bag. "Are you leaving already?" she asked. Her voice was light, but I didn't hear any real question in it, just a hint of relief. "Yes," I said. "Thank you for the party. Olivia liked your gift," she said. I nodded. "Tell her I love her," I said. Sheila didn't say anything about what had happened. No apology, not even a hint of regret. The drive home felt longer than the drive there. The sun had dipped below the hills by the time I pulled into my driveway. The porch light flickered as I stepped inside. It always did that when the weather changed. The house was quiet, too quiet. Without Edsel, it had never felt quite right. I set my purse down, took off my shoes, and wandered into the living room. The mantel still held photos, wedding pictures, baby snapshots, school portraits. I picked up one of Sheila and me on the beach. She must have been 8, her arms around my waist, her smile wide and full of sunlight. That day, she'd collected seashells and told me I was her best friend. I stared at the photo for a long time. Then I put it back. The next few days, I didn't leave the house. I moved through the rooms quietly, picking up little things, wiping dust from corners I'd ignored. Sheila's words kept echoing in my head. "You're not worthy of such gifts." Every morning I'd wake up with them. Every night they followed me into sleep. I waited, half expecting a call. Some kind of explanation. But none came. By the end of the week, I went down to the basement. I hadn't touched the old photo boxes since Edsel died. It was too painful. But that day, I opened them. The boxes still smelled faintly of lavender from the sachets I'd tucked in years ago. I brought one labeled Sheila. School years up to the living room, made a cup of tea, and sat in my chair. The first photo was her first day of kindergarten. Hair in 2 pigtails. Front tooth missing. I remembered ironing that little uniform the night before, carefully braiding her hair in the morning. She was so excited she barely touched her breakfast. Another photo showed her playing flute in the school concert wearing the white dress I made by hand. I'd skipped buying myself a new coat that year just to afford the fabric. Edsel and I had cheered the loudest, even though she missed a note near the end. I turned the page. Sheila, maybe 9, grinning, with a dirt-covered face, knees muddy from helping me plant tomatoes out back. I could still hear her laugh that day, high and sweet and free. Somewhere along the way, that little girl had started to vanish. The change wasn't sudden. It came gradually. It started when she left for college. She studied finance, started spending time with wealthier kids. Edsel and I drove up to see her once. I wore my best blouse, and Edsel wore the suit he only took out for weddings and funerals. But Sheila barely looked at us. She spent most of the visit texting on her phone. Then she brought Paxton home for dinner. He smiled, shook our hands, said all the right things. But I saw how his eyes moved around the house, taking in the worn carpet, the mismatched dishes, the modest furniture. He didn't say a word, but I knew that look. I'd seen it for years behind the counter at the post office. The look people gave when they thought they were better than you. After they got married, it only got worse. Sheila stopped coming home. Her voice changed. Her clothes changed. She started quoting Altha. Altha says this, Altha recommends that. It was like watching her slowly become someone I didn't know. When Olivia was born, I hoped things might change. I thought motherhood would soften her. Maybe she'd come back to herself a little. But Altha was right there taking over. She picked the nanny, the school, even the toys. When I suggested a preschool near my house so I could help pick Olivia up, Sheila brushed it off. Altha says Montessori gives children a competitive edge. That was always the answer. Corbin changed too. He used to be my little shadow, always bringing me flowers he picked from the yard. But as soon as Sheila settled into her new life, Corbin started chasing it too. He traded his old jeans for tailored shirts and started working in pharmaceutical sales. His job took him to conferences and client dinners, and he started talking about commissions instead of compassion. Then he met Veronica, polished, polite, and cold as marble. She once looked at the casserole I brought to a potluck and asked if it was vintage. I remember one Thanksgiving. Altha was at the head of the table, even though that had always been my place. No one said anything. The conversation turned to politics, and I mentioned something I'd read in the paper. Sheila cut me off. Altha, could you explain it better? She said. Corbin made some joke about my voting history. Veronica laughed. They all laughed. I sat there with a plate full of food I couldn't taste, thinking about how far they'd drifted. Another time, Olivia asked about my old leather bag. Why don't you have a new one like Altha? She said. Before I could answer, Sheila chimed in. Grandma lives a different kind of life, sweetie. Then Veronica added, Nobody carries bags like that anymore. Corbin smirked. Only people who can't afford better. The last straw came a year ago. Sheila called in a rush. Olivia needed a dress for her concert, but the one they ordered hadn't arrived. Could I make something? I said yes, of course. I stayed up 2 nights straight, sewing it by hand. Embroidered tiny musical notes across the bodice, just like the theme of the concert. When I brought it over, Sheila barely looked at it. It's a little homemade, she said. Altha walked in, took one glance and said, You can't send her on stage in that. They'd already bought a new one. Boutique, designer, ready to go. They handed my dress back like it was something that had come from a thrift store bin. Maybe Olivia can wear it around the house, Sheila said. I hung that dress in my closet. It's still there, neatly pressed, never worn. As I sat in the living room that night flipping through photos, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. I hadn't just lost Edsel. I'd lost my children. And no number of old pictures or birthdays or baked cookies was going to bring them back. Then the phone rang. Mom Sheila said her voice clipped and professional Paxton and I are having a little dinner on Friday. Just family. Nothing fancy. Can you come? She rarely called without notice. I said yes. I didn't ask why, but I had a feeling I'd find out soon enough. And I did. Friday came with heavy rain. I left early, worried the traffic would slow me down, but the roads were clearer than I expected. I pulled into Sheila's driveway just before 7. The porch light was already on, casting a yellow glow over the wet, brick steps. Paxton opened the door with a drink in hand, smiled like he'd been rehearsing it. Maris, come in. Everyone's already here. I stepped inside. Their living room was warmer than usual, candles lit fireplace going. 10 people, maybe more, were gathered around in little clusters. Altha sat near the fireplace, upright hands folded neatly in her lap. Corbin and Veronica stood nearby, both holding glasses of champagne. Sheila was across the room laughing with 2 men in dark suits I didn't recognize. I looked around for Olivia. She's at a friend's sleepover, Sheila said, walking over. It's a grown-up dinner, Mom. I nodded. I see. I followed her into the dining area, still holding my coat. She didn't offer to take it. I draped it over the back of a chair. She introduced me to Paxton's co-workers, Jeremy and Brian, both polite but distracted, glancing past me the moment they shook my hand. Get something to drink, Sheila said, gesturing toward the sideboard. Paxton can make you a cocktail. I'll just have some water, I said. I'm driving home tonight. You could always call a cab, she said, then added, or stay in the guest room. I didn't respond. The guest room, last I saw, had been turned into Paxton's gym. The evening moved along in pieces. I sat near Corbin at one point, asked about his job. Regional manager now, he said, without looking up from his phone. More travel. Better bonuses. I told him I was proud of him. He nodded. That was the end of that. Dinner was served at 8. I was seated between Veronica and one of Paxton's co-workers. The conversation drifted from real estate to politics to stock options. Someone mentioned the election, and I offered a thought about one of the candidates' positions on healthcare. Paxton smiled like I was a child. Maris's numbers just don't add up. His plan isn't sustainable. I started to reply, but Altha jumped in. Typical working-class thinking, always focused on what you're getting, not who's paying for it. I glanced at Sheila, hoping she'd say something. She didn't. I folded my napkin across my lap and stared at the centerpiece. After dessert, Paxton stood and tapped the side of his glass with a spoon. The room quieted. We have a little announcement, he said, looking over at Sheila. She smiled, placed her hand on his. We've accepted a partnership with an international firm, she said. We're moving to London for 3 years. Applause followed a few cheers. I sat still. London, that was across the ocean. I looked at Sheila. What about Olivia? I asked. Her school, her friends? There are wonderful international schools in London, Sheila said quickly. We've already toured a few. Altha helped us pick one. It'll be a great experience for her. But she already speaks English, I said, confused. She'll be immersed in culture, Sheila answered. That's what matters. And when are you leaving? I asked. In 2 months, Paxton said. Right after Christmas. 2 months. That was all the time I had left with Olivia. I didn't say anything else. I couldn't. They spent the rest of the evening talking about London, the neighborhoods, the clubs. Paxton would join the social events Altha was already arranging. No one asked if I'd be okay. No one asked if I'd be able to visit. I excused myself as soon as it felt polite. Sheila followed me to the door. Mom, we were wondering, could you keep an eye on the house while we're away? Just stop by once a week, check the mail, water the plants. We'll have a gardener and cleaning service, of course. It's an hour's drive each way, I said. And I'm not sure I can manage that every week, especially in the winter. You're retired, she said. You have time. I have a house to look after too, I said. She pressed her lips together. I thought you'd be happy to help. It would give you an excuse to be in a decent neighborhood. I didn't answer. I just stepped outside, pulled my coat tighter around me, and walked through the rain back to my car. The windshield wipers beat out a steady rhythm all the way home. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat in the car for a few minutes, staring at the house. The roof still leaked when the wind shifted. I had buckets lined up in the hallway, catching the drips. I went inside, put on the kettle, and laid the month's bills on the table. Water, electricity, property tax. The numbers added up fast. San Bernardino was considered desirable now, which meant the taxes were rising every year. My pension barely covered them. I stood at the window, looked out at the garden. The roses Edsel used to trim had overgrown. The grass had turned to patches. The lavender was dry, the soil hard. I hadn't had the energy to keep up with it. I asked myself something I hadn't dared ask before. Why was I clinging to this house? It was too big for one person, too expensive to maintain, and every room reminded me of what used to be. I'd built my life around this home, raised 2 children here, celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, mourned my husband in that very kitchen. But all those moments were gone now. The people in them had changed. So had I. That night, I didn't sleep much. I sat at the kitchen table into the early hours, the sound of rain filling the house. I looked around. Everything I owned was in this house. Every memory, every disappointment, every dream that never quite happened. At sunrise, I opened the window and breathed in the morning air. It was sharp and clean, and it carried the smell of wet soil. I stood there a long time. Then I made a phone call. "Hello, I'd like to speak with a real estate agent," I said. "I'm thinking of selling my house." The woman on the other end asked a few questions, then booked an appointment for the following week. "We'll come take a look," she said. "See what we can do." I wrote her name down on a notepad by the phone and stared at the letters. I didn't know what came next, but I knew the part that had come before years of being left out, talked over, and taken for granted was ending. What I didn't know yet was just how much my children had counted on me never making that call, and what they'd already done behind my back. The real estate agent arrived the following Wednesday just after lunch. Her name was Carla Dennis, mid-40s blazer, with sharp lines notebook in hand. "You've got good bones here," she said as she stepped into the living room. She walked slowly, running her fingers lightly across the edge of the fireplace mantel, then paused in the kitchen. "Original tile?" I nodded. "It's old," I said, "but I've kept it clean." We toured the house room by room. Carla took notes, asked a few questions, took pictures with her phone. "You've kept everything in fine shape," she said. "Some buyers love this kind of place, just needs fresh paint. Minor updates." I asked what it might be worth. She flipped a page in her notebook. "It depends on how quickly you want to sell, but given the area, you could walk away with more than you think." That night, I sat on the back porch with a cup of chamomile tea. I could still hear Carla's voice in my head, "Walk away with more than you think." It had been a long time since I'd thought of this house as something I could leave behind. It had always felt like the place where things ended. Edsel's final breath. The last family dinner before everything changed. But maybe it could be something else. Maybe it could be the beginning of something I hadn't dared to consider. A week later, Carla called. "I've got a buyer interested, cash offer, no contingencies. He wants to move fast." She gave me the number. I wrote it down, stared at it for a long time. I told her I'd need a few days to think. I spent those days quietly packing a few boxes, sorting through drawers, deciding what I'd keep and what I'd let go. By Friday, I called her back. "Let's do it," I said. "Go ahead and accept." The paperwork moved faster than I expected. Within a month, the deal was nearly done. We set a closing date just after New Year's. Carla gave me a short list of things I needed to update before the inspection, nothing major. I called a handyman, scheduled a few small repairs, made a trip to the hardware store for touch-up paint. I didn't tell Sheila. I didn't tell Corbin either. Then one morning, I opened my mailbox and found something strange. A letter, not from the county or my pension office, but from a private tax attorney in Pasadena. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened it. Inside was a typed notice regarding a quitclaim deed, something filed just under a year ago. The document claimed I'd signed over my house to a trust controlled by my daughter. At first, I thought it was a mistake, a misfiled document, a scam maybe. But the details were correct: my name, my property address, even the parcel number. I checked the signature line. My name was there, signed in blocky cursive. I hadn't signed it, but someone had made it look like I had. I stared at it, then read it again. And again. Then I went to my file cabinet and pulled out every deed, tax receipt, and mortgage document I'd ever saved. I compared them to the photocopy of the quitclaim. The seal looked real. The notary's signature looked real. But the signature wasn't mine. I sat there for over an hour. The heater clicked on. Outside, a dog barked. I didn't move. That evening, I drove to the public records office in town, asked for help locating any documents tied to my property. The clerk, a man about my son's age, typed in the parcel number, then raised his eyebrows. "Looks like it changed hands last year," he said. "Transferred to a trust. Here's the copy." He slid the paper across the counter. Same document, same forged signature. I took the paper and folded it carefully. "Can I get a certified copy?" I asked. "Sure," he said. $10. When I got home, I made a cup of coffee, even though I never drink it at night. I sat at the table, turned on the old desk lamp, and spread everything out. I looked at every line, every date. The filing had been made the same month Sheila had come by with Paxton to check on me after my fall down the porch steps. That day, she brought lunch, made small talk, asked how I was managing the house alone, said she'd help me organize some documents. I'd let her look through the kitchen drawers while I napped on the couch. It must have been then. I pulled out the small safe I kept in my bedroom closet. It had my birth certificate, Edsel's death records, a few savings bonds. My original deed was there, notarized in 1973, clear and unbroken. I called Carla the next morning, told her to pause the sale. "Just a few days," I said. "Something's not right." Then I made another call, this time to a legal aid office. The woman on the phone took my information, listened quietly, and said someone would call me back. "These cases can get complicated," she warned. "But if the signature's not yours and you didn't authorize it, you've got a case." I hung up, sat still for a moment, then walked into the living room and opened the curtains. The sunlight hit the carpet, just like it used to when Olivia would lie there coloring. Later that afternoon, I got a call from the legal aid office. A man named Jared Walker. He sounded young, but competent. "Do you have the documents in front of you?" he asked. I said yes. I read him the case number, the trust name, the date. "You're not the first parent I've spoken to about this kind of thing," he said quietly. "It happens more than you'd think." He told me what to do. Bring the documents, file a report, get the signature analyzed. He said I'd likely need to challenge the deed in court. "It's a process," he said, "but if your name was forged, we can prove it." That night, I opened my sewing drawer. Inside was the journal I kept during Olivia's first year. I flipped to a page where I'd written about holding her during a thunderstorm. She'd been scared, her tiny hands clutching at my shirt. I'd hummed a lullaby until she fell asleep against my chest. I looked at that handwriting, my own. Neat, curved, familiar. Nothing like the one on that forged deed. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I put on my winter coat, packed the documents in a folder, and drove to Jared's office in Pasadena. His desk was covered in paper stacks, and a small space heater hummed at his feet. He looked over the documents, nodded as I explained. "You're doing the right thing," he said. "It won't be easy. But we'll start with a formal affidavit." As I left his office, I passed a woman in the waiting room, gray-haired hands clenched around her purse. She looked up and gave me a small nod. I nodded back. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun was going down. I stepped inside, locked the door behind me, and sat on the couch with the folder in my lap. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was something else. Awake. And everything in me told me one thing with absolute clarity: Sheila and Paxton had made a terrible mistake. Because I was finally ready to fight. The first time I said the word forgery out loud, it felt strange in my mouth, too sharp, too serious. But that's what it was. Jared helped me file the affidavit at the courthouse downtown, tucked behind the post office and across from the library. The building was quiet that morning, just the soft hum of fluorescent lights overhead and the click of my shoes on the tile. We stood in front of the clerk's window, handed over the paperwork, and waited while she stamped it. "You've officially contested the deed," Jared said afterward. "Now we notify the trust holder. They'll have to respond. If they don't, we go to court and ask for nullification." He paused, then added, "If they fight it, we prepare for a full hearing. But this puts the sale on hold. They can't move forward with anything now." The walk back to my car was slow. The sun had finally broken through the gray. It felt lighter, even though I knew what was coming wouldn't be easy. That weekend, I finally told Corbin. He'd invited me to brunch his idea for once. Veronica had a work event, and he suggested a cafe near his condo in Irvine. It was bright inside, all white tile and succulents. He ordered a cappuccino, I had tea. "I need to ask you something," I said once we'd finished eating. "Did you know anything about Sheila putting the house in a trust?" He looked confused. "What do you mean?" I pulled the folded document from my purse and slid it across the table. "This," I said, "it has my signature on it. But I never signed it." He read the first few lines, then leaned back. "She never said anything to me," he said slowly. "I figured she helped you with some paperwork last year after your fall." "She helped herself," I said. He ran a hand through his hair. "Mom, you sure you didn't sign something by mistake?" "Sometimes people I didn't," I said firmly, "and I've already filed a challenge with the court." He nodded once. "Okay, that was it. Just okay. No outrage, no questions, no defense. Just a quiet understanding that something serious had happened and he wasn't going to get involved." I left the cafe a little after noon. The wind had picked up. On the drive home, I thought about the last time I'd seen Corbin cry. He was 10. Fell off his bike, scraped both knees, came running through the back door with blood on his jeans. I'd scooped him up and carried him inside. He hadn't cried since. The notice to Sheila was sent by certified mail. She received it 3 days later. She called me the next morning. "Mom," she said, her voice tight, "why would you file something like this?" "Because someone forged my name," I said. "And until a judge tells me otherwise, that house is still mine." There was silence on the other end. Then she said, "This is going to ruin everything. We already gave the buyer a verbal confirmation. Paxton's furious. I imagine he is." "You're not thinking clearly," she said. "You can't handle that house anymore. We were trying to help." "You stole it," I said, "and you didn't even ask." She hung up. 3 hours later, Paxton showed up on my doorstep. I saw him pull in from the front window, his black SUV spotless, parked at an angle like he was ready to leave fast. He didn't bother to knock gently, just 3 sharp raps on the door. I opened it but didn't invite him in. "What are you trying to do?" he asked. "Tank our careers, destroy our finances." "I'm trying to protect what's mine," I said. He held up a folder. "You want to drag this through court? Go ahead, but we have the documents. We have the notary. We have the timeline. All you have is a story." I didn't respond. I looked at his face, calm, rehearsed. He'd probably practiced every word in the car. "Let me guess," he continued. "You talked to one of those legal aid people who told you you've been wronged. Well, good luck. Litigation takes time, money, and you're not in great health, are you?" I kept my hand on the door. If that was meant to scare me, it didn't. His jaw clenched. Then he turned and walked back to the SUV without another word. That night, I sat in the kitchen and opened my drawer of old letters. There was one from Olivia written 2 years ago when she stayed with me for a week in the summer. Her handwriting had been large and messy. I like it here. The frogs in your yard sound like drums. I folded it carefully and tucked it into my purse. If I lost the house, I wouldn't just lose 4 walls and a roof. I'd lose the last place my granddaughter remembered feeling safe. The following Monday, Jared called. "We've got a date for mediation," he said. "January 18th. That's where we try to settle without going to trial." "Will I have to see her?" I asked. "Yes," he said, "but you won't be alone." On the morning of the mediation, I wore the navy dress I'd saved for formal events, pulled my hair back, wore Edsel's old watch. Jared met me in the hallway outside the conference room. Inside, Sheila sat across the table with a young woman in a gray suit, her attorney, I assumed. The mediator explained the rules. No shouting, no personal attacks. We were here to listen, respond, and try to reach an agreement. Sheila spoke first. "The transfer was done with my mother's knowledge," she said. "She just doesn't remember signing." I slid a stack of documents forward, my handwriting samples, notarized statements, dated letters. "Compare them to the signature on that deed," I said. "Then tell me I forgot." The mediator looked through the pages. "It's clear there's a dispute," she said. "And if we can't settle here, it'll go to litigation." "I'm not signing anything today," I said. Sheila's attorney whispered something to her. She nodded, then stood up and left the room without saying another word. The mediator sighed. "That's the end of mediation?" Back in the parking garage, Jared leaned against the wall and looked at me. "You did well," he said. "You stood your ground." It was quiet in the car on the drive home. Just the sound of the engine and the rain starting to tap against the windshield. That night, I reheated some soup and turned on the porch light. The bulb had gone dim, flickering at times. I made a note to replace it in the morning. There was still a long way to go. But for the first time in a while, I felt like the ground beneath me was solid. I was no longer waiting to be saved or hoping someone would speak up for me. I had done it myself. The trial date was set for early April. Jared said it might take 2 days, maybe 3. I circled it on the little calendar by my fridge right between Easter Sunday and Olivia's spring break. It felt strange to see it sitting there, just a square with a number in it holding so much weight. In the weeks leading up to it, Jared and I met twice a week. He'd come by the house on Wednesdays, and I'd drive out to his office on Saturdays. We went over statements, documents, anything that could reinforce what I already knew, that I had never signed over my home. One morning, just before our final prep meeting, he handed me a folder. Inside was a notarized statement. I read the first line and paused. "This is from the notary?" I asked. He nodded. "Took some work, but yes. She moved to Nevada last year, but I found her." I kept reading. The notary admitted she hadn't been present when the document was signed. She said Sheila had brought it in already signed and asked her to notarize it as a favor. Said she assumed it was all above-board family stuff. I closed the folder and looked at Jared. "Will that hold up?" He nodded again. "It's enough to open questions, enough to show a pattern." It rained the night before the trial. I slept lightly, listening to it patter against the roof. In the morning, I packed a small tote with a bottle of water tissues and the letter Olivia had written me 2 years ago. I didn't need to read it, I just wanted it close. The courtroom was small, pale wood, quiet carpet. There was a single row of benches on each side and a few folding chairs at the back. Sheila sat with her attorney wearing a cream blazer and her hair pinned up. Paxton wasn't there. When I walked in, she didn't look at me. The judge was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses and a slow, steady voice. She explained the process, then let each side present their opening remarks. Jared kept it brief. Sheila's lawyer went longer, listing family tensions, confusion, questions of memory. Then came the witnesses. The notary testified first. She didn't make eye contact with Sheila, just stated her version of what happened and answered questions as calmly as she could. When she finished, the judge asked her one question. "Did you believe this was legal when you stamped it?" The woman hesitated. "I believed it was informal. Not legal." That sentence seemed to hang in the air. Next came Corbin. He wore a gray suit and a blue tie. His voice was low, but clear. He confirmed that I'd been sharp and independent and said he'd never seen me sign anything with Sheila present. He didn't take sides, but he didn't defend her either. When it was my turn, I stood slowly and walked to the stand. Jared asked me to describe the day I learned about the forged trust. I explained it all: the call from the bank, the confusion, the discovery. Then, the moment I realized my name had been taken off the title. "Did you ever authorize this transfer?" he asked. "No," I said. "Did you ever sign the document listed here?" "No." Sheila's attorney stood. "Mrs. Wimble, you're 77 years old. Do you take any medications for memory loss or cognitive issues?" "I don't," I replied. "Have you ever forgotten signing something and remembered later?" "No," I said. "Not something like this." The questions kept coming, some careful, some sharp. I answered them all. When I stepped down, I felt the tightness in my chest begin to ease. That night, Jared called. "We'll get the ruling in a few days," he said. "But I'd say we're in strong shape." I thanked him, then sat for a long time at the kitchen table watching the tea kettle steam. 3 days later, the judgment came in. The court ruled that the deed transfer was invalid. The trust was dissolved. Ownership was restored to me. The document had been notarized under false pretenses, and the court found sufficient evidence that the signature did not match any verified sample. I received the decision by mail. It was 6 pages long, typed and stamped. I read it once, then twice, then folded it neatly and placed it next to the letter from Olivia. Later that afternoon, I got a message on my landline. It was Sheila. "Mom, I don't know what to say. I didn't think it would go this far. If you want to talk, I'm here." I didn't return the call. That evening, Corbin stopped by. He brought dinner chicken pot pie from the bakery on Maple and a little box of lemon bars. "I figured you might not want to cook," he said. We sat at the table and ate quietly. After a while, he looked at me. "I'm sorry," he said, "for not asking more, for not stopping it." "You were caught in the middle," I replied. "Still," he said. "I should have done more," I nodded. He helped wash the dishes and dried each one carefully before stacking it back in the cabinet. On his way out, he turned back at the door. "I'm glad it's yours again." "Me too," I said. That night, I left the porch light on. The wind had picked up again, rustling the leaves in the yard. The next part of the story wasn't about courtrooms or documents. It was about what came after, when the house stayed standing, but the people inside it had changed. The morning after the ruling, I stepped onto my front porch just after 7. The sky was still soft with early light, the street quiet except for the sound of a distant lawnmower. A bird landed on the feeder by the azalea bush. I watched it peck flutter, then disappear into the branches. The house felt different now. Not physically, the floors still creaked in the same places, the porch still sloped a little to the left, but something had shifted. It was mine again. Fully. Officially. Legally. And everyone knew it. The calls came slowly. First a message from Sheila, then one from Michaela asking if we could talk without pressure. Darren didn't call. Not then. I gave it a week. Let the quiet sit where the arguments used to live. Then I picked up the phone and called Jared. "Do I have to let them back in?" I asked. He paused. That depends what you mean by let them back in. I mean the house, the family dinners, the routines. You're not obligated to restore what they broke, he said. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. That Friday, I called Corbin and asked if he'd help me draft some letters. He came by in the afternoon with a yellow legal pad and a blue pen. I made coffee and we sat at the dining table. I started with Darren. Dear Darren, I wrote, I wish things had gone differently. I wish I could say this didn't leave a scar. But it did. I'm not closing the door forever, but for now, I need space. Your choices carried weight, and so does silence. I hope one day we can speak honestly. Until then, please know, I am safe, and I am whole. Mom, then Sheila. Dear Sheila, I've read your message. I have no answers that would satisfy either of us. You crossed a line, and you did it with intent. I will not pursue charges. That is my choice, but I also will not pretend nothing happened. For the time being, I ask that you respect my boundary and do not contact me. This house, this life, they are mine to live in peace. Corbin slid the letters into envelopes and sealed them himself. I'll take care of it, he said. He did. The following week, I changed the locks again, not out of fear, just clarity. I called the security company and updated the access codes. I replaced the emergency key hidden under the garden stone. The only people who had them now were me and Olivia. She came home the weekend after Easter. I met her at the station, same as always, standing by the passenger pickup in my windbreaker with a small paper sign that read, Wimble. She laughed when she saw it and hugged me tightly. At home, we unpacked her bag, set the guest bed with fresh sheets, and talked about everything and nothing. After dinner, she looked at me across the table. Are you okay? She asked. I paused. I'm getting there. She nodded, then reached into her purse and pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper. I found this at a flea market in Portland, she said. It reminded me of you. I opened it slowly. Inside was a ceramic trinket box shaped like a robin's egg. When I lifted the lid, there was a folded slip of paper inside. I opened it. It read, You get to decide what comes next. I looked at her, then at the little box and smiled. 2 days later, we went out to lunch. Olivia suggested a place downtown near the Riverwalk, one of those converted warehouse cafes with tall windows and rustic tables. We were halfway through our sandwiches when I heard someone say my name. Mrs. Wimble. I turned. A woman stood there, maybe early 40s, short red curls and a navy cardigan. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said. I think we met once, at the Planning Commission meeting last year. You spoke about the senior transit proposal? I nodded. Yes, I remember. She smiled. You made an impression. I actually just took over the commission chair role, and your name came up again last week. We're building a community advisory board for a new housing initiative, and, well, if you're open to it, I'd love to talk more. I blinked, then glanced at Olivia. I'm flattered, I said. I'd be happy to talk. We exchanged numbers. After she walked away, Olivia leaned in. Look at you, she said, smiling, taking up space. I shrugged, but the warmth stayed with me the rest of the day. That night, I sat at my writing desk, opened a new journal, and wrote one sentence across the top of the first page. This life is still mine. And that's where the healing began, not in court filings or notarized papers, but in all the quiet ways I started showing up for myself again. The porch light stayed on a little longer that night. The following week, I trimmed the hedges for the first time in over a year. The clippers felt heavier than I remembered, but I liked the rhythm of its snip-pull pile. There was something reassuring about taking care of the little things again. That afternoon, I baked a peach cobbler with the fruit Olivia brought me from the Saturday market. I pulled out my old recipe card, the one with my mother's handwriting faded in the corner. The house smelled like cinnamon and butter, the way it used to when Darren and Sheila were kids, racing through the kitchen, barefoot and sunburnt. For a moment, I let that memory live beside the hurt, without one canceling the other. The letters I'd sent out weeks earlier remained unanswered. No knock at the door. No apology. I'd thought it might sting more, but it didn't. It felt honest. Olivia left for Portland the following Monday. She hugged me tight on the porch, then stood back and looked at me. "You seem lighter," she said. "I am." She smiled, tucked her tote under her arm, and walked to the cab. I waved until it turned the corner. That evening, I sat on the porch with a glass of sweet tea and opened the little robin's egg box she'd given me. I kept it on the side table now beside my reading glasses and a notepad where I'd been jotting down things I wanted to do: fix the back gate, try the watercolor class at the rec center, maybe even take the train up to see Olivia in the fall. I unfolded the slip of paper again. You get to decide what comes next. I thought about all the things I used to tolerate in the name of keeping the peace. How many times I let myself be small, quiet, agreeable just to avoid making anyone uncomfortable. I thought about the night they served me that paper, the way Darren looked through me like I was already gone. And I thought about how even after everything I still baked that cobbler, still fed the birds, still said good morning to the mailman. The truth is, they took their shot at replacing me. But I never left. Not really. I stayed. And in the end, the house stayed with me. There's a kind of power in choosing not to fight every battle, but refusing to disappear. In standing still while the storm passes and knowing the porch light will still be on when it does. I don't know if Darren will come around. I don't know if Michaela ever saw me as anything more than an obstacle. But I do know I won't shrink myself for either of them again. The door isn't locked, but it's no longer wide open. That's the difference. I've started hosting Sunday coffee again, just me and a few neighbors. We sit out back under the oak tree, listen to the wind move through the leaves, and talk about tomatoes or grandchildren, or nothing at all. It's quiet, but it's mine. And if you're listening to this, maybe you've lived through something similar. Maybe someone tried to edge you out of your own story too. If they did, I hope you'll remember this dignity doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just stands its ground and waits. Thanks for being here with me. And if this meant something to you, go ahead and share it, or just leave a quiet note in the comments. I'll be right here.